Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Julie Ament Gran, Chief Operating Officer at GrandPad. They are a private technology company founded in 2014, specializing in a simple, secure tablet designed for older adults. Their mission is to reduce social isolation and reconnect seniors with the people who matter most through user-friendly devices and world-class customer support. Under Julie's operational leadership, GrandPad continues to expand and innovate in the senior-focused technology industry. In her more than 25 years of leadership experience, Julie held key roles at Dayton Hudson Marshall Field's, Macy's, and LifeTouch. She joined GrandPad with a commitment to drive revenue and deliver seamless functionality for older adults and caregivers. The company has been recognized for bridging the digital gap for seniors, helping them navigate online communication and telehealth services with confidence. They have also earned praise from families and caregivers worldwide for making technology accessible to an often overlooked community. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add-Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. Imagine being able to give your senior living employees free access to doctors, therapists, and prescription medications. And here's the fun part. The program actually puts more money into your employees' pockets, and the company's too. One recent client was able to increase net profits by $900 per employee per year. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefits.com. All right, back to our guest today, the COO of GrandPad, Julie Ament Gran. Thanks for making the time to share your story today.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be with you.
So, Julie, you brought more than 25 years of retail leadership experience from places like Macy's, Dayton Hudson, before joining GrandPad. What lessons from that traditional retail world have most influenced how you oversee operations for senior-focused technology today?
Yeah, great question. I think coming to GrandPad was an opportunity to really do something that was meaningful for me and helping people that struggled with technology. And it was really looking at kind of taking those corporate best practices. But then, we've all been there where it's like, oh, we need to do this because it says it in a book or a binder, but then really taking the practical side of that and applying it to business. So if something was a steps 1 through 10, how do you look at that and say what really needs to apply to our business? So, really operational, looking at the right things to do. So when I came to GrandPad, one of the roles I had was leading our customer service team. And you might think, it's customer service, how hard is that? But it was really thinking about we're serving older adults. And so we didn't time phone calls. It was taking the call, listening to what the individual needed, and then really putting together kind of, best practices around what did we see in terms of common themes. And then very simply taking that feedback back to our product design team. So really kind of that full circle in terms of what do we hear, what do we see them use, and then taking it back to the product team. So I felt like everything led up to this role in terms of going through very traditional companies that led me to this spot to be able to help influence this amazing product to help older adults then use technology that maybe either didn't have experience with technology or perhaps had cognitive decline where it just was a struggle to use standard technology.
So basically, it's more like a business operational framework that you're able to bring from previous experiences into this world. Because the industries are a little bit different, right?
Exactly. So I guess it's a great way of saying it, Anthony. It's kind of applying common sense to, hey, you learn these best practices. So it could be, said differently, someone goes to, school to be, or an MBA, and they learn how to do something, and then they get in the real world and they're like, oh, wait, that's not how it really works. And so, in this case, having worked at larger organizations, then coming to a smaller organization and then being able to really apply, as you said, that framework to what really needs to happen in this situation. And so meeting the customers where they're at, and then as our company has grown, then applying that both to kind of a B2C and then a B2B space of like, okay, what really needs to happen here? Who are we serving? Who are the end users, and then what do they need? And then how does your business need to grow profitably in that case as well?
Mhm. So how did the door open to join GrandPad, and why did you make the switch?
Yeah. So at the time, our previous chief operating officer, who has since retired, was a colleague that I'd worked with at LifeTouch for a number of years. And he reached out, we had lunch, and I thought to myself, here I am working for a long-term established company, and he's working for a startup. Like, gosh, why would I make that change? Right. And this is, late 2018. And I remember thinking, I can keep doing what I'm doing, which I felt like I'd achieved a role. I was at that time the vice president of operations for a field organization, and it was a role that I absolutely loved. It was, leading a large group of people, developing them, working on budgets. Some people don't get excited about working on budgets, but turns out I do. But it was really shaping the organization at LifeTouch, and I was really excited about that. But every time I talked to this individual, Dave Jakeway is his name, I became more excited about what GrandPad was doing. I grew up in a small community. My parents were in the farming community, and my parents had very little experience with technology. They're both in their 80s. And it really resonated with me around their experience with technology and maybe what they were missing out on, which was, being able to connect and see pictures of their children, their grandchildren, their great grandchildren, and then also seeing, extended family members that had cognitive decline. And I thought, there's something here. Like, it just literally kept pulling at my heartstrings. And so that was one piece. The other piece was I had the opportunity to talk to a number of people at the company, and every single person I talked to that worked for GrandPad, one, shared that same passion about helping older adults, but they were just smart and curious people. And there was something about that was just such an attraction to the company, of people that wanted to roll up their sleeves. They didn't care what their title was. It was like, how do we get this done? And I think after, meeting 8 or 9 different people, I thought, this is kind of interesting. Will this work out? And I remember the day that at the time the CEO made me the offer, and I came home and my husband said, hey, like, what do you think? And I was kind of, pale, and he said, what's the matter? I'm like, it's a real offer. And he's like, well, what's the matter with that? And I said, I don't know, like, startup, big company, like, what do I do? And he's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to call my mom. And here I am, literally in my late 40s at the time, thinking like, who calls their mom? But it was really just, it was such a draw to this company. And I think for many people would seem not logical, but I felt like I could go and make a difference. And, here nearly 7 years later, I'm very confident that I have made a difference. And I know the number of people that we've touched, both individually, kind of as older adults, as well as the companies we've worked with. This was all pre-COVID. Certainly then COVID hits, and we know we've made a difference in a number of people's lives, and I wouldn't change it for anything. So
where was the company at the time that you joined them? Was there a product out? Was it still conceptual?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, the product was out. So at the time I joined, which was early 2019, we had, I'll say kind of our product. I mean, it's since been enhanced, but the GrandPad was out. We were doing B2C work. So we had one of our channel partners. So we were selling the product through a channel partner, and we were doing, just, I'd say, initial work with some B2B partners, and very, I'll say, dabbling at that point. Literally fast forward a year, so 2020, We're hearing about COVID. I think we all sort of kind of flash back, and on one hand, you flash back and go like, do I want to think about it? Uh,
No.
but then you do. And I remember the day one of our partners called and said, hey, they happened to be in California, and they said, we have to help serve our older adults, and can you get us 265 GrandPad's? And literally in 7 days, we got them 265 GrandPad's because it was, the second week in March. And so that began the beginnings of our B2B business. So today, about 55% of our business is in the B2B space, where we sell the GrandPad to organizations that then serve older adults, primarily, dual eligible individuals that, are both Medicare and Medicaid eligible, where they want to be in their home, but generally have, a number of chronic conditions. And so the GrandPad serves as, a safe and secure, trusted communication device that the healthcare organization can then communicate with them, and allows them to safely communicate with that older adult. They can put doctor's appointments on the calendar. They can put resources on the GrandPad, and they know only a trusted circle can communicate with them. And so, I think back to that time, the phone was ringing off the hook. We were helping a number of organizations, deploy devices. And I think back and smile at that time. While you certainly, it was a horrible time from none of us knew what was going to happen in the future. Many of us here at GrandPad went to bed, exhausted, but put our head in the pillow thinking we made a difference in helping some of these organizations keep people safe and connected. And that was rewarding, right? And it helped to accelerate our business and think about how could a version of telecommunications serve this vulnerable population into the future. So certainly was a pivotal time for us.
So I want to better understand the product, because
Yeah.
on the surface, I'm thinking, okay, iPad for older adults.
Yep.
Why not just use an iPad? I've got a 9-year-old son who's been using one since he was 6. Just put a piece of software on there that older adults can use. Tell me why my thinking is wrong.
Yeah. Well, and that can work for some people. So, right. I don't think we claim to be everything for everyone. So, what our tablet is we today partner with Acer, who designs our tablet custom made for older adults. So under the surface is Android software, but we take over that software. And so all of the updates, so think about your 9-year-old son. There are, updates that come, right, where, you'll get a pop-up screen that says, hey, you need to install the latest version of fill in the blank, right? And, if you and I are very familiar with that technology, like you put in your password and you do that installation. If you're 82 years old and never done that, what do? You call your son or daughter, or you say, oh, you know what, your son or daughter is really busy, I'm not going to do that. Well, then if a healthcare call is supposed to come in and you can't take it or you can't get information. So really the premise behind it is, right, so it's custom designed tablet. We take over the operating system, Android under the covers. We do all of the software updates behind the scenes. So that's kind of part one. Part two is the buttons are large and easy to identify. So it says very clearly, like, call button, and easily identifiable for those that maybe have a sight impairment. And then the really, I'd say 2 parts of the secret sauce are, one is we make sure only individuals can call and email it that are in the trusted circle. So we find that with this particular population, and quite frankly, I'll say, Anthony, I don't know about you, but certainly my cell phone, I'm getting calls and texts that, hey, your bank account's been compromised. And of course, it's a scam. But we find that older adults in particular are becoming more and more scammed, and they look more and more real. And with AI technology, that's becoming even more concerning. So part of our technology is this trusted walled garden that only individuals that are part of the circle can call the device and or email the device. And for many people, that is so reassuring because they have been scammed. I mean, the numbers are quite staggering. And then lastly, I would say our true secret sauce is our customer service team, which we call member experience. So we wrap the custom technology with the custom software with our world-class service. So we hire individuals that, really have a passion for helping to care for older adults that are patient. And it's, again, not your traditional call center where, hey, how long were you on the call? We timed that call, like get off the phone, take the next call. But really individuals that can, be patient with an older adult, help them engage with the device, and then show them how to use it. We also have the ability to remote into the device. So if someone's, really struggling on how to use it, we can remote into their device with their permission and help them be able to, use the device in the way it's intended. To date, our oldest user was an individual in North Carolina, Hester, at 116, so
Oh my
116.
gosh.
And so when you think about that, I mean, her daughter was in her 90s. Like, you just think about 106, like, right? You think about how just that is, and it makes me smile, right? Like, she was able to connect. And I think of, one story with a different organization where they allowed us as GrandPad to join, and they would do these kind of like think of lunch and learn, Anthony, where, they would have their group together. And then they do little breakout rooms through Zoom. We've got a custom interface with Zoom. And the breakout room I was in, one of the individuals, she lovely lady. I would have maybe guessed she was in her 90s, very put together. And they were sharing recipes. And all of a sudden, like, someone is talking, but it's likely her son, because he says, I think it was, Mom, what do you think of this? And she said, well, it's very intriguing to me that I can be in my living room chair and having this conversation with other people and see you all, but I'm in my chair. And he said, well, isn't that neat, Mom? Like, tell him how old you are. And she said, well, I'm 110. And so here, through this organization, they're providing a GrandPad. And I literally sat there, Anthony, thinking, imagine what she's seen in her lifetime, 110, like, just, and that this technology is allowing her, in her little apartment to connect with other people and feel community. I'll probably start crying because it made me so happy that day to think of, like, working for an organization, to know, like, that brought her joy and brought her son joy to be able to do that. Like, I, like, all day couldn't stop smiling because that was so fun, right? So
this is like a mini iPad. Like,
yes.
what's the footprint? Like, what's the
so it's an 8-inch device, and like you said, I mean, many people would say, hey, it looks just like an iPad, and so custom software on it, and
is it meant to replace a phone?
It can make phone calls and video calls, right? So very much so. And, we, at some point in time, will probably add a phone to our portfolio, because some people say, well, it's a little large to carry around. But certainly it can make phone calls as well. So,
and I'm looking at the website here, and the pricing seems reasonable.
Right.
I mean, there's a special going right now. I don't know if I want to mention the special price, because I don't know when people will listen to this, but go ahead.
So no, I was just going to say, I mean, we periodically have specials. So, but really it is, meant to, like, right, you buy the hardware, we've got different plans. And part of that has been our evolution from a consumer standpoint, is to really think about how do people engage with kind of products. And so we've had different plans, and that's been interesting to see. But you can see, like, it's very, very comparable to cell plans. And part of having those different ranges is, often people will say, like, oh, my mom's 94, I'm not sure she'll use it. And it's like, hey, here's an option to try it. And we also have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's like, try it, and if it's not for you, that's okay, right? Like, but we want people to see if it's an option.
And so how does it work? Like, I set this up for my mother, and it's just sort of like always on in the cradle, so that if we try to call her, it's not like it's on vibrate in her pocket or in her purse and she doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
It, like, flashes up there. Or if she wants to reach out to one of us, it's real easy because the buttons are obvious. and she can click like contact directory and my son Anthony or my son Vince.
Yeah,
And
it's even easier than that, Anthony. So
okay.
I'll start on the first side of it. So there is the charging cradle that it can sit on. And so when the cover's open on that, it actually goes right to slideshow. So like if she's not using it, what's awesome is we have a free companion app. And so you and your family can all join the free companion app and add pictures. There's no ads in that companion app. And so the pictures then go right to her GrandPad and are then rotating through. So that is a huge favorite of many of our users. While it's sitting there, if you call it, there's lots of different options. It can flash if someone is hearing impaired so they can see it. It can make noise. It's very loud. We have front-facing custom speakers because we do find as older adults age is they're hearing the decibels available to them. And again, I'm probably not using the right language, but go down. So we make sure that we've got front-facing speakers and that they're nice and audible. So easy for her to hear and see. We also have, for those maybe that have, change in condition over time, we also have a feature called auto answer where after 3 rings or 5 rings, you can set it up however you'd like that. It can auto answer. So in the event, we've had people towards the end of their life where maybe they're, in a position of they can't get up to answer, you can have it auto answer as well. So that's kind of on her end, on your end. On her end, under our call button feature, she would just hit the green call button and then it shows all of her contacts. And we encourage each member that is associated with your mom in this case to put their family photo. So your picture would be there if your son had a different phone number, and all the pictures are there. So she can just scroll through, and you'll notice that in the device that as you're scrolling, it's usually left to right, and it's part of our design. We have a group of individuals called our grand advisors, and the youngest now, I think Richard just maybe turned 80, but any new product feature is we put in front of our grand advisor group before we roll out. And part of the reason I mentioned that is when the product was first designed, and it was before I was here, but most of our smart devices scroll sort of vertically instead of horizontally. And so they were showing that to our grand advisors, and they're like, you don't read a book that way. And so our design is, left to right. And there's buttons and arrows. So on the call feature, you would, kind of just scroll and find your picture. And maybe one meaningful story is one of my colleagues that I worked with a few years ago. His mom had advanced dementia, and he was out and about on a Saturday, and he sees on his phone he's getting a call from his mom from the GrandPad, and he thought, oh, his sister must be visiting her in the facility that she was living in. So he answers and thinking it's his sister, and it's his mom, and he says, Mom, like you're calling. And she said, well, I was looking at this thing, like she didn't know what it was called, and I saw your picture and I pressed the button. And it was the first time in 10 years that she had called him on her own. And like
Wow.
when he told me that story, like, again, I'll probably tear up, Anthony, but like just like she's like, I saw your picture and I knew it was you, Mark. And I thought, I wonder what happens if I press the button. And they had this lovely conversation. And, it was probably just a handful of months later that she passed away. But it's one of this dear memories of his that he has of that the technology met her where she was at and empowered her to be able to talk to her son. So it's stories like that just, for me, make my day, right? Of like, hey, we're able to help people live their best life where they're at.
That's really cool. I want to get back to talking about the business to business component, which sounds like it really grew during COVID. But first, I want to understand how you're reaching that B2C side. How are you guys connecting directly with consumers?
Yeah. So as you mentioned earlier, we've got our own website. And so we kind of do what I'll say are common.
Which real quick, sorry,
oh,
is
yeah,
grandpad.net.
Yes. Well done. So we do kind of, I'd say, traditional means of marketing kind of through Facebook, Instagram, Google Ads, kind of, I'll say modern time marketing tools. And then We've got channel relationships. So, where we'll use other sort of cell phone providers, where, they sell other cell phones. And so we're continuing to look at how we grow through those partners. And we've had relationships with places like Consumer Cellular, and then, continue to explore other avenues to do that through major channel partners. So, again, those are always ongoing, if you will, in terms of what that looks like. So that's on the B2C side of things. And then on the B2B side of things, like I mentioned earlier, we saw that grow through COVID times, and then, look to continue to expand that just in the ever-changing healthcare space. And so on the healthcare side of things, more on dual eligible special needs programs, which are kind of those individuals that would be eligible for both Medicare and Medicaid, are kind of really
Why
what's in our sweet
why
spot.
specifically the dual eligible?
There's within those, there's a lot of supplemental benefits that are available to those individuals. And so just there tends to be opportunity for digital equity where individuals um, need assistance in like, how do I connect? So maybe they don't have, they maybe have a cell phone, but maybe it's a flip phone. And so there's opportunity for them to be able to do both digital health that way in terms of having a video call with a healthcare provider, as well as social isolation and loneliness has a huge impact on their health. And so what some of those plans do is have benefits related to um, making sure like there's reimbursement towards depression and loneliness and isolation. And so some of those plans can carve out funding specific to that. And so then matching up where that there's a good opportunity there, if that makes sense. And so, right, part of it is just looking at those health plans that line up that would be a good benefit for GrandPad.
And so who are these businesses that help get you connected to the right folks? Are they like senior care facilities, skilled nursing? What?
It's more the plan. So, like, we work with, organizations like within, so like UCare is a plan here in Minnesota that we work with, health partners, PACE organizations, so Program for All Inclusive Care of the Elderly. Not all states have PACE organizations, but that's been a large group of organizations we've worked with across. I think we're, in a number of states. I don't have the number of states that we're working with, but that was one of the ones, certainly through COVID, that we've worked with. And then, sometimes we'll work with very specific plans if there's a diagnosis, like, as an example, we've done some pilots with organizations that are working on kidney care, right, where depending upon if someone's very isolated or a rural population. So it kind of depends on the organization a little bit in terms of what might be a fit for them.
What other business to business relationships would you like to see develop?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think we're always looking at where there's that need. I mean, again, our sweet spot is obviously older adults, and typically we would say, super seniors is something that we've used, those greater than 75. But I would say that's also ever changing in the sense that, sadly, cognitive decline continues, to not be solved. And so that is becoming younger and younger, but it's really older adults. And then I would say, we're seeing more in the space of rural disparities as it relates to healthcare. So, if you start to look at some of the trends over time, there's more and more pressure on the healthcare system. And so, I look again at, some individuals in my own family and where they live and access to healthcare. And so, how do we look at those organizations that are responsible for caring for those individuals and what access do they have to, healthcare? And so thinking about how can technology help them see individuals and meet them where they're at. So again, thinking about that rural healthcare side of things, one organization we work with today needs to see individuals for an annual assessment to make sure, are they receiving the care that they need to? And so are there opportunities there where, again, they can utilize a GrandPad to see someone that's maybe 5 hours from a clinic? And so just thinking about those opportunities for older adults. When you look at those over the age of 65, in the next 20 years, this will be the only population that will actually grow in size
Mhm.
because people are living longer. And so just thinking about how we can help meet that need safely from a healthcare standpoint, but also then also reducing loneliness and isolation. There's some really interesting kind of facts around as we've seen more and more people maybe be and I won't have the statistic, Anthony, just so you know, but when you look at there's more people that have divorced like in the last 20 years, you sort of take that forward into an older adult space. That means there's likely more people that are quote single, and then like what that does in terms of people being lonely and how can we connect them in terms of a community. And so just thinking about that of, like I said earlier, the individual that was 110 and allowing her to be in her living room and connect with other people and how we can make sure that people aren't isolated. I mean, some of the facts on isolation is really staggering for people of any age.
I mean, just anecdotally, I've talked to a lot of folks in senior care facilities, and everybody has the same story going through COVID. Folks who were okay, kind of, they were getting by, they were doing all right. And then they lost contact with family. They lost, that regular contact with the people that worked there, were there to support them. And they just declined. They just, went through the floor, and there was no recovering at that point.
Yeah. There is a statistic, I think it was Dr. Juliana Holt, and I can send it to you, but I think she's got a study from the it's maybe 2012 that indicates loneliness and isolation is equivalent to smoking like 15 cigarettes a day. And you're sort of startled by that number. But then, what you just said, and I think we saw that during COVID, right? Of just people losing the will to live because they just didn't have that interaction. And you can see it, and it kind of breaks your heart. And then it's like, okay, what can we do? And certainly, just to be clear, I mean, we think in person, connecting with people in person is best.
Oh,
If you
sure.
can't be in person, right? Like, can I see my mom over the phone? And the importance of seeing them, like I video call my mom's only 3 hours away, but like there's times where I want to see, like, is she okay? She tends to like to garden and things like that. And I'm like, are you drinking enough water? And just and in seeing the change in how people look, and just that gives you reassurance that things are okay as well. So
And so you were talking about how the device helps give folks access to care providers in a much easier way, especially if they're not able to get out of the house on a regular basis. You guys, just to be clear, if I'm understanding it correctly, you guys aren't providing those care services, but you're integrating with
yeah.
particular virtual care providers. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so generally, like when we work with an organization, they will have kind of a care network, and so one of the buttons, like I know you were looking at the website, there's a number of buttons that are on the GrandPad, and so we provide with our B2B enterprise version. There's a button called Providers, and then under that button, we can provide all the providers for that individual, so they can have their doctor, their cardiologist, um, their dentist. And so it's easy for them, to then just be able to call that individual. So think about, like I often say, it's like, think about all the cards that are maybe on the refrigerator for an older adult that like they're all then in the GrandPad device. The other piece is with some of these organizations, like a PACE organization, the PACE organization takes over, if you will, as the primary care for that individual. So in our B2B enterprise space, we put what's called the concierge button on the GrandPad. So it's the very first button. And so they can just call the pace button right there and ask them any question. And so it's just very, very easy for them to be able to get a hold of their provider, ask questions, and, get that simple care versus literally having to, like, okay, I have to go call someone. So very easy to do. And then provide resources. So we can put, if someone maybe has congestive heart failure and now they're on a low sodium diet, we can put, a PDF of, healthy eating tips on, or we've had organizations say, we're going to conduct a low sodium cooking class and it's going to be virtual. And Anthony's going to be in his home, I'm going to be in my home, and we're going to do that through the GrandPad. In our enterprise version, we've got a portal situation where they can then, much like we are today, do it virtually and show them how to do that. So there's many benefits for the healthcare organization that's providing the GrandPad to be able to do that. The example I gave in healthy cooking, or fall prevention is another one, just as an example, where they can do a virtual tour of the home and just see, are there hazards in the home for that individual. So lots of different applications.
Is there a feature or a function that you guys, hey, this looked really good on paper, and as you tried to execute it, kind of fell apart for some reason?
There was one initially pre-COVID that we did an integration for a transportation app, and I'll just leave the app out of it for the name of it, where it seemed like, hey, that would make sense, right? Where older adults might need to get from point A to point B, much like you and I do, where it maybe didn't take off as well as we thought, so we sort of backed away from that one. So I think that's one. I mean, I think we always look at like, hey, should we continue to go forward with, things like that, of like what are apps that we would want to bring forward? One of the questions we often get, like, oh, can we just go to the app store and download apps? I mean, because our software is custom software, that is not an option today. I think, in the future, do we see, like I said earlier, do we see a phone version of the GrandPad? Do we see a modified GrandPad where there are apps, for quote a younger, older adult? So I think those are things that we'll look at in the future in terms of being able to provide flexibility. So the transportation app was certainly one of them.
What's the most powerful growth lever that you guys are pulling on right now today?
It's really the B2B side of it, which in that healthcare space of it, because like I said, it's the fastest growing population, right? People are aging. There's more pressure on the healthcare system. There's more, well, I shouldn't say more. There's, generally speaking, less people going into the healthcare profession. And so it seems like there's just this like convergence, if you will, of not enough people to care for individuals. How do we do it differently? And so it feels like there's a good opportunity for us there. We've seen growth there. Part of it is, I think there's also healthcare is huge, right? And so we're not going to be everything to everybody. And so I think it's really important to be very, very focused on what makes sense for us, who do we make sense for, and how do we serve that segment. I think we've all probably seen organizations that are like, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that. And as we look to the future, we're very focused on what it is we do and what it is we don't do, and who we serve and who we don't serve. And so we have, I think, an amazing product. It does not serve everybody. And so, and being clear about that, and that's okay. I think when companies tell us that, vendors that we're buying from, I actually appreciate that. So I think we're very focused on, as I talked about earlier, kind of that dual eligible group, because there are many underserved needs there, and it's a good fit for us, being able to provide a digital solution to those individuals that really have special needs and have chronic conditions and need a communication tool to help them connect with their healthcare provider.
What's the biggest operational challenge that you've had to overcome in your time there, Julie?
Wow, I feel like you might have stumped me, Anthony.
Or just pick a big one. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to pick the biggest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the biggest one. I mean, I think under the covers, right, we're an LTE provider, right? So like the device comes and you can connect to the internet. So under that, right, we use all the major providers. And so today, right, like if your cell phone doesn't work, you can easily switch from one provider to the other. They can send you a SIM card. If you're 86 years old, we don't send SIM cards out. So it's not hard. We just replace the device, right? You send out a new device with a different SIM card in it. So not hard. Just you think differently about how you solve things operationally when you're dealing with an older adult, right? So yeah, so I wouldn't say hard, just you think differently. Or if there's, I know one of the partners we worked with, we're changing from 3G to 4G at one point in time. And again, people like, oh, you just send out a SIM card, not for an 86-year-old, right? So the beauty is, I think, because we have this Grand Advisor group, like it really does, we tend to start, we always think about, okay, grandma's sitting in her chair, how does this work for them? So we always come at it from the customer perspective. So that's why I kind of say it doesn't feel like anything's hard, like it's just maybe more complex. So, yeah.
What about something that, I don't know, was kind of holding you guys back in terms of growth or being able to deliver more units or something like that, that you guys have had to work through?
Yeah, I mean, I always say this to people is, the good news about, particularly on the B2B side, the good news about GrandPad is it's not a commodity. The bad news is it's not a commodity. Like, meaning you're still selling a new concept, right? So if you said, like, hey, every older adult's going to have a GrandPad as part of, or have a device as part of their healthcare solution. Would that be good for you, GrandPad, or bad for you? I'd say that's good for us, right? Because it raises the boats for the industry. So, right, sometimes when you're talking to, payer providers and talking about, this solution, it depends on where people are at with the change curve. And so, I think that's part of it is just like sometimes you're selling a new concept of like, how will people use this? So, some of the organizations we work with, while you're talking about this device, you're actually managing the change curve, right? You're going in and you're delivering the device to an older adult, but then if there's a care team, I'll just use a PACE organization. They have an interdisciplinary team of individuals, from a behavioral team to, an occupational therapist to a doctor. Those teams then have to embrace utilizing the GrandPad to deliver care and information to you, right? So you're managing change at multiple levels when you're delivering a new idea. And so I think it's that kind of concept of just recognizing it's not just a product, right? Like it's not just like, hey, here you go, it's a thing and you're done, right? Like, so we, particularly in the B2B side, like we've got account executives and client success managers that are there with you every step of the way and are equally as passionate about their business, because we know we're managing that change along the way, if that makes sense.
It does. It strikes me that one of the really cool things about your product is something you talked about in the beginning, where it's kind of a closed system, right? Like you have to be on the list of trusted contacts for a message to get in or out, which really helps to protect the user.
Exactly.
How do you get more people added? Say it's my mother and she's got a new next door neighbor that moves in and now she wants to add Sally into her list. Can she do it? Is she calling you guys for you to add her? How does that work?
Couple ways. So she can call us and say, hey, I approve Sally to be added, and we can right there, our customer service team can do that. Typically on the both sides, B2B and B2C, there's usually a family administrator. So like in your case, if you were the family administrator, you can add Sally. You can send a link to Sally and say, hey, Sally, I've approved you and you can be added. So the family administrator can add her. So easy ways to do it. We've got the free companion app. So when we set somebody up, like what our customer service team does today. So let's say that your mom is a new GrandPad user. We actually, almost 50% of our customer service calls are outbound, where we're calling both the user, in this case, your mom, and you, and onboarding and saying, Anthony, who do you want added, right? And you give us a list and we'll add them. And like, right, because for us, we know that the more people that are engaged with the end user, the more likely they're going to be successful, right? And the more images coming in, the more likely that person's going to pick up the GrandPad and use it and see like, hey, did anybody post any pictures? Like, did I see anything? So it's very easy for individuals to get safely added. And unfortunately, right, things happen in families. Families are messy at times. And so at times, if there's somebody that has to come off, equally can come off as well.
Right. I wonder if you guys have considered either integrating with devices that do this or building out your platform to be able to offer more kind of proactive monitoring services?
Oh my gosh, like, you must have read my mind. We actually are integrating, we integrate with two solutions today. One, we have a Bluetooth weight scale. So some of our partners, particularly with congestive heart failure, the weight of an individual is pretty critical to their health. So they can gain, 2, 3, 4 pounds quickly because of just fluid in their body. And again, certainly not a medical expert, but fluid around their heart, it becomes concerning. So we've had partners reach out to us to say, hey, can we connect your device to a weight scale? So we've done that. So we've got an integrated solution there. And so what happens is while they've got a GrandPad, they take their weight. We've got kind of, I'll say, a range of programs in the sense that if the person doesn't take their weight, a pop-up reminder happens on the scale. But we also can have our member experience team reach out to them to take their weight, and then that information gets transmitted to their healthcare provider. So that's been a really successful program. And then we have a integrated blood pressure monitoring tool as well. So, same thing where we can, do reminders on the GrandPad to say, hey, Julie, it's time to take your blood pressure. And really, to the point you're making, is really trying to be proactive and helping that person, be healthy and monitor that and make sure that, they're watching what they're eating, and or sometimes it's not even so much what they're eating, but maybe there's a change in medication, and those tools help them to see, is that medication working in the way they want it to.
Tying in with an Apple Watch or building a Fitbit kind of competitor? Or
Again, so fascinating. We tried something early on, and I'm going to forget the name of it. We are actually revisiting that conversation. What has been maybe a barrier, and this is maybe to your earlier question, is the charging of these guys is what's usually kind of holds us up, if you will. Again, kind of our population being the super senior group of 75 or older, as people age, just their dexterity tends to be a bit more challenging. And so finding a device that carries a long battery life, that doesn't have to be charged as frequently, is always a little bit of a challenge for us. However, that's coming a long ways as well. So, and there's also different ways, like it doesn't always have to be sort of that tiny little connection. So we just last week looked at like, hey, what do we put back on the table in terms of devices? Because there's really some interesting devices that also monitor kind of your walking gait, and the gait of your walk is predictive of some other health pieces. And so, like, how interesting would that be for different people, both, kind of individually as well as on the healthcare side of things? And then just fall detection, right, is a key component. So it's back on our product list to kind of come back to.
Okay. We'll check back in maybe in a
Yes.
few months and see how that's
Yeah,
progressing.
absolutely.
Kind of shifting gears here, Julie, we all go through big, tough stuff in life, right? We don't often talk about that. I want to give you a chance to maybe share a big, serious challenge that you've overcome in your life and how you got through it.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody from the outside, look at people and you always say like, oh, like, don't they have it? Like that person is, like they got it all together. And I think, uh, you always step back and go, well, wait a second, not everybody has it all together. And first of all, everybody's going through something, like you just don't know what they're going through. So, we probably all have multiple stories. Mine is, I'll just say, I don't want to say interesting, but is mine. A little over 13 years ago, my first husband was suddenly diagnosed with lung cancer. And so I'm going about my career, and, uh, with some regret, I'll say, my career was very, very important to me. And so worked a lot of hours, and long story short, here we end up, going through radiation and chemo, and in a short time frame, his health rapidly declines. And what is interesting in that is through that, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about the people you work with. You learn a lot about family. And through that, I had the opportunity to, I guess, look inwardly and at times think like why me, right? You can sort of take different perspectives in that. And sadly, I lost him after 5.5 months. It was a short journey, and you know, uh, still painful to this day, of course. But I remember a really close coworker of mine who had a different story, but a sad one, said, it's a little bit about perspective. And I kind of looked at him, I think it was at a bitter phase probably. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, 99.5% of the world would want to be you. And I kind of, and he said, look at it. You have an amazing family. You have an amazing support system. You have, taken the lessons that you've learned in life and applied them to a career. You're a curious person, and you like wake up every morning trying to make a difference. He's like, 99% of the world would want to be you. Yes, you've had this horrible thing happen to you, but they would want to be you. Like, you live in a first world country, you have access to food and water. And it was this pivotal moment, I think, for me of, you can choose your perspective. Right? This horrible thing happened and you don't get to choose it, but you can choose your perspective. And so it's forever on me. So you can wake up and say, and in life and at work and in relationships, of why did something happen, and focus on like, why did that happen? Why did that happen? And kind of, narrow down. And I think it was probably who I was a little bit before that happened, but it is certainly who I am today, in the sense of, people will come to me at work. Oh my gosh, this thing has happened like this. And it's like, and literally a little bit of, and Mike was his name, my first husband, I'd be like, nobody died. Like, and you laugh a little bit, right? Because that's what you have to do. But I think it is perspective, and let's talk through it, right? Of like, hey, and I say that not to make light of it or anyone that is going through it, but it is to try to look at situations and to say, hey, what can you learn from this? What can you take from it? And like, can it move you forward in your life, in your perspective, and can it help somebody else? And so that's really been a little bit of my journey. And at times, like, I know at work, I will share that story to, maybe help people through a difficult situation, and to share like, this is who I am and where I am today, right? And I'm fortunate in the sense that I say I've had another chance at love, and I'm happily married today, and I have a stepson. And so, you see people and you see them for a moment in time, and so just know that everybody's got a journey. So.
Mm. So you mentioned your friend sort of giving you this different perspective. Was that a perspective that was easy for you to embrace?
At that moment in time, like, maybe not as easy, right? Like, I mean, just, I think it was, I think he saw I was having a bad day. So I think it was a chance for him to kind of just like, hey, here's a perspective, right? And in his case, I mean, he equally had a journey. Like, he lost a child to SIDS. He was a recovering alcoholic. And he, in that point in time, shared his story with me to show how he came out the other side of it, right? And that it is a journey. And partially sharing the story, like we're friends, and like, if you're having a bad day, let's talk about it, right? So like, it was kind of the power of friendship, and it was the, like, you kind of need to hear this, because like, there's paths you can go down. Like, so it was, I'm forever grateful for the conversation, right? Like, he's a dear friend today, and he's since retired, and we don't talk all the time, but like, I also know I can pick up the phone and call him, and feel so blessed to have had so many positive people in my life, and he's just one of many.
Say more about that, because I'm curious what the support system was like for you going through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's a world of, I mean, in general, right? I think you get what you put out there, right? So I think through my career, I feel like I've always been a person that, I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but like I'm always like the person back in the day when there were quote cubes of like, what are those people doing over there? Right. Like I'm a curious person. And so I think because of being curious, I also like to be helpful. Like I don't know that I've ever said like that's not my job. And so part of that is I think, I like to be helpful and put that out there. So I think when going through sort of this time of, hey, I had to leave the office at a certain time to, pick my husband up to get him to a treatment. Like I literally had a team of people because I was a little bit notorious knowing for working long hours. They'd be like, okay, it's time to go. Like, right. And so I had this support team of, they knew how candidly to manage me in a difficult time. And and I think they could see, like, I had a boss that was like, you need to do what you need to do, like, meaning you're going to work at times and be available at times. And towards the end, candidly, I remember, you know, people talking about like probably need to take a leave, and they're like, well, we'll need to take your computer away from you, and like, and I say that smiling because they knew it was also a distraction, because they're like, how do you manage this, right? So it was I'll just say an interesting time as I look back at it, a little bit surreal in the sense that it doesn't seem like you. It's a little bit kind of like we talked about earlier of, you kind of think back of COVID and you're like, did that really happen? Like, because there's a part of me of like, was that, I guess that was me, right? So,
In times of grief and loss, some people, they do better to sort of unplug and be in their grief, be in their sadness. Others take more of I need something to distract me and keep me busy. What was your balance like? Were you kind of going back and forth between those two, or did you gravitate towards one or the other?
it's funny that you asked that question. Like it initially seemed like I needed to be in work. So like it was like get through one day, like, right. So you'd kind of go through and it'd be like, okay, it's Friday. Like, okay, I'm done with work. Like meaning like I just try to get through the day. And then I'd kind of get to Friday night and I'd be like, okay, I don't have to talk to anybody for a while. And then I'd get to about Saturday at 3 o'clock and I'd be like, oh, like poor me. Like it would, there'd be this quiet time where I'd like, cause and some people don't believe me, but I'm an introvert by nature in the sense that like I gain energy by, time by myself and like listening to either podcasts or audiobooks. Uh, but there was this window of time where if there was too much time by myself, then, look at how sad my life is because I had this terrible thing happen. So, and I'm a routine person, so I quickly recognized, I was like, oh, I got to figure this out. Right. So like, it was probably a combo for me, like meaning I knew I needed some time where I had like quote alone time where I could kind of like reflect on like, okay, here's what happened, and how time at work went, so that it wasn't just sort of masking the grief, right, but as like dealing with it. But it was also like I can't have too much time alone because then it becomes this sort of like woe
Spiral.
is me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and to your point, like everybody deals with it differently. And so like when I've known other people to go through something similar, it's trying to offer support without sort of saying, here's how you do it, because it's different for every single person, right? So
Yeah, one thing I've noticed observing myself, I've never experienced loss on that level, but certainly have had loved ones pass away. And I typically do best with a small amount of alone time to process and grieve, better with more time to do it with other people who were affected by the loss, or maybe not, but
Yeah.
can support me and sort of hear and allow me to process and vent. And then pretty quickly, for me anyways, and what I've experienced up to this point, move into, okay, now I have to move on. Now I
Yep.
need to put one foot in front of the other. And that doesn't mean to say that the grieving process is done.
Right.
It still bubbles up at times, unpredictable, but
Yep.
I see you nodding your head.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I'm very much like that as well, Anthony. I mean, we're, gosh, I don't know if it's 13 or 14 years. I'd have to do the math. But I can talk about many of the things very calmly, and there's things like I can, on a moment's notice, be in tears, right? And so, but for me, it was I did have to put one foot in front of the other. Like I had to move forward. And some of that probably is just maybe how I was raised. Like, I mean, in the sense of, I remember a day in sort of, towards the end where it wasn't going well. And I called my mom and like, was in tears and she like let me cry for what felt like 2 minutes. And she's like, okay, are you done now? And I was like, I
oh,
kind of not really, she's like, okay, but like, what are we going to do moving forward? Like, what are you going to,
yeah.
and in a way, right. Like that was okay, like there's something about action, at least for me, whether again in this personal situation or even at work, like action for me feels like there's control. And while we're, quote, never in control, action has some sense of moving forward and feels like you're doing something. And so, and I tell it to people at work as well. Like sometimes there's things that, of course, are out of our control. What can we do, in the situation that can help move it forward? And that sometimes gives people comfort.
Mm.
It does for me.
Thinking about just a couple of folks I've lost in my life, my grandparents who played a big role in raising me. I'll still have moments of sadness as I remember and think of things. But for those situations, it happened in the normal course of time. They had lived
Right.
a full life. And so, for the most part, when that sadness comes up, there's still a great deal of love and gratitude coming through with that.
Yeah.
I wonder in your case with the passing of your husband, maybe it's harder to get to that place of love and gratitude, and perhaps there's still more bitterness that comes up when those emotions well up. Yes, no.
Yeah. I mean, I think you feel gypped, right? I mean, just to
Mm,
say it straight, not great, in the sense that like, hey, how did this happen? Why did it happen? And then um you kind of go like, okay, I can't do anything about it. And this will sound Pollyanna, Anthony, and it's not meant to be, but simultaneously while I was going through it, a coworker, and I didn't know him super well, but he was going through something similar with his wife who had brain cancer. And she ended up having brain cancer for 7.5 years. And through that journey, they had two children. Mike and I didn't have children, but over the course of time, right, they did a number of surgeries. And so she lost the ability to speak and to move. And I remember like thinking to myself, like, could I have survived 7.5 years of that? Like, right. So like in a way, like I was kind of like, am I grateful for 5.5 months of treatment? Or
mm,
so I found myself like, while I felt gypped, I felt thankful for the weird journey I had, if that makes sense. Like meaning, eh, and or you hear of other stories. Like I interacted with a gentleman recently who his wife had early onset dementia, and she's, already unable to speak, and I think she's only 62. And I thought, oh wow, like so I kind of came back to try to be at the perspective stage of didn't like it, can be better, but at least it's not this. Like so, yeah.
So you eventually remarried. What's your
Yep,
husband's name?
Chris.
Chris.
Yeah.
How long before you felt like you were ready to go out and date or meet people?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story as well. Like it was fairly soon. Like, I mean, you know, like within a year of Mike passing away, and part of that, like some people will be startled by that, right? Part of it, and again, goes back to Mike and I's story. Like you know, we knew he was in hospice, we knew he was dying, and we were going through, you know, the hospice checklist more or less, and vivid story of I was making him dinner and I mean, the things that you're doing, Anthony, are a little bit surreal at this time, but we're buying a burial plot, right? You're buying things that you don't think you're ever buying. And you can buy one plot or two plots if you're doing casket or cremation, right? So like I'm like so I'm asking the question and Mike says to me, well, we're going to get cremated, but you should buy two. And we had a dog. And I was thinking, well, I don't know if they're going to let us bury Wiley at the cemetery. And he's like, well, no, like you're a young woman. You should get married again. And I want you to get married again. And like, of course, I'll tear up again. He's like, but like, I want that for you. And so, you know, what a gift, right? Because I think there are situations where that doesn't happen. So, you know, I happen to be a person of faith, and I truly feel as though Mike had a hand in picking Chris. And so, you know, Chris has a wonderful son. And so some people don't get a chance at love once. I got it twice. And so here I am. So on the other side of that. So, you know, and so life is a journey, right? And it comes at you and it's unpredictable and messy and good all at the same time.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that, Julie. I've just got one more question for you today.
Yeah.
But before I ask it, I want to do three things. First of all, anybody looking to get in touch with Julie can visit her LinkedIn profile, and we'll have a link in the show notes. But it's Julie Ament, Ament Gran, Gran. And also to get in touch with the company, they've got a great website, lots of details you can buy on there, grandpad.net. And then as a reminder for listeners, if you want to get more senior living employees access to benefits that won't hurt them financially and carries a financial upside for the company, reach out to us at addbackbenefits.com. Finally, if you'll take just a moment to leave us a comment or review on your favorite podcast app, you'll hold a special place in my heart forever. Thank you. Okay, so last question, Julie. A year from now, you and I reconnect and you are celebrating something big. What's the big thing you hope to be celebrating 1 year from today?
God, I feel like it's two things. So
Let's
that's
hear it.
probably,
Let's do it.
Well, two things would be one, we will have the next, probably the next generation of our tablet that will be out there. So, which is just a normal evolution, I guess, of our product, but we're excited about that. 5G enabled, so that'll be fun. And then it'll likely be just further expansion into the healthcare space of you know, large partners. So I know not specific, but part of that is how it works, right? So, but just really, you know, hitting major milestones with helping lots of older adults. I mean, I feel a little bit generic in saying that, Anthony, but I just, when I look across the country and see, you know, how many people need to be able to connect digitally and get information, and there's so much changing with all these different plans, and just being them able to safely, you know, and securely connect and know that they're not being scammed. I mean, so anyways, I'm rambling, so I'll try to be concise, but I think it's really just helping more seniors and older adults and them feeling safe and confident with technology, because it's here to stay, and we want to be a part of that conversation.
And for the new generation of device that's coming out, outside of upgraded hardware and all of that and the 5G capability, which is really nice, are there other features that people can look forward to?
You know, oddly enough, compared to other technology, the answer is no, and mostly on purpose, like meaning because we want to keep it simple, right? So behind the scenes, like, yes, there's, you know, the insides of it, yes, will be different, but for the external side of it, no, just because we want to keep it simple. So yeah.
Wow. Well, Julie Ament Gran from GrandPad, I want to be the first to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Anthony. It was an absolute pleasure.
Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.